The cargo crate weighed 300 pounds, but Katie Morgan lifted it anyway. Her arms burned and her back ached, but she didn't complain. She never complained. Complaining didn't pay the bills, and it didn't send money home to her little brother Danny back on Earth. Nexus Prime was the largest trade station in this sector of the galaxy. It floated in the darkness between stars like a metal city, home to thousands of beings from dozens of different worlds. Humans were just one species among many here, and not a very important one at that. Katie wiped the sweat from her forehead and looked around the cargo bay. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the space, loading and unloading freight from ships that had traveled light years to reach this place. Some had scales. Some had fur. Some had tentacles or extra limbs or skin that glowed in strange colors. Katie had stopped being amazed by them a long time ago. Now they were just co-workers, customers, or problems to avoid. She worked for the Dawn Chaser, a human freighter that ran cargo between Earth's colonies and the alien trade routes. The pay was decent, the work was hard, and the captain was fair. That was more than most humans could hope for out here in the galaxy. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 40 years. That sounded like a long time, but it wasn't. Some of the species on this station had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before humans even invented fire. They had empires, technologies, and histories that made human civilization look like a child's first drawing. And they never let humans forget it. Katie grabbed another crate and started walking toward the loading dock. Her friend Pete Sullivan was already there, checking the manifest on his data pad. Pete was a mechanic, good with his hands, always smiling even when things got hard. He was 23 years old, same as Katie, and he had signed up for the Dawn Chaser because he wanted to see the stars. Heavy load today, Pete said as Katie set down the crate. Always is, she replied. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. The cargo bay was loud with the sounds of machines and alien languages, but Katie had learned to tune it out. She focused on the work. Lift, carry, set down. Lift, carry, set down. Simple, clean, safe. The trouble started around midday. Katie heard them before she saw them. Heavy footsteps, like hammers hitting the metal floor. Deep voices speaking a language that sounded like rocks grinding together. She looked up and felt her stomach tighten. Varkith. There were 3 of them, and they walked through the cargo bay like they owned it. Maybe they thought they did. The Varkith were a warrior species, 8 feet tall with 4 arms, and scales that covered their bodies like armor. Before the treaty that brought peace to the galaxy, they had been conquerors. They had invaded worlds and crushed civilizations beneath their clawed feet. The treaty had ended their wars, but it hadn't ended their pride. Most Varkith still believed they were better than everyone else, especially humans. To them, humans were small, soft, and weak. Humans had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. They were barely worth noticing. The leader of the group was named Zoran. Katie knew him by reputation. Everyone on the station knew him. He was a bully who enjoyed tormenting anyone he saw as beneath him, which was almost everyone. But he had a special hatred for humans. Zoran spotted Pete working near the loading dock and changed direction. His 2 followers grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. This was going to be fun for them. "Little human," Zoran called out, his voice echoing through the cargo bay. "What are you doing?" Pete looked up. His face went pale, but he kept his voice steady. "Working. Just working." Zoran walked closer until he was standing right in front of Pete, towering over him like a mountain. He reached down with one of his 4 hands and grabbed Pete's data pad. He looked at it for a moment, then crushed it in his fist. The device shattered into pieces that fell to the floor like broken teeth. "Oops," Zoran said. His followers laughed. Pete didn't say anything. He knew better. Fighting back would only make things worse. The station had security officers, but they rarely got involved when Varkith caused trouble. It wasn't worth the paperwork. It wasn't worth the risk. Katie watched him across the bay, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She wanted to do something, to say something, but She knew she couldn't. Zoran was twice her size and 3 times as strong. His scales could stop a knife. His claws could tear through metal. What could she possibly do against something like that? Zoran shoved Pete, sending him stumbling backward into a stack of crates. The crates fell with a loud crash. Zoran laughed again, then turned and walked away with his followers. Just like that. Just another day of making humans feel small. Katie ran to help Pete up. He was shaking, but he wasn't hurt. Not this time. "I'm okay," he said, but his voice was thin. "We should report this," Katie said. Pete shook his head. "What's the point? Nothing will change. It never does." He was right, and they both knew it. Humans had no power here. They were guests in a galaxy that didn't want them, tolerated only because they were useful for cheap labor and simple tasks. They weren't warriors. They weren't conquerors. They were just humans. Katie helped Pete clean up the fallen crates. Around them, the cargo bay returned to normal. Aliens went back to their work. No one had tried to help. No one even seemed to care. That night, Katie sat alone in her small cabin on the Dawn Chaser. She looked at the picture of Danny she kept by her bed. He was 15 now, still in school, still dreaming of a future among the stars. She had promised their mother before she died that she would take care of him, that she would make sure he had a good life. She thought about Zoran. She thought about the fear in Pete's eyes. She thought about all the times humans have been pushed around, laughed at, treated like dirt. Something cold settled in her chest. It felt like ice, but it also felt like fire. Katie turned off the light and laid down in the darkness. She didn't sleep for a long time. Tomorrow would be another day of work, another day of keeping her head down. But something had changed inside her. She didn't know what yet. She didn't know where it would lead. She only knew that she was tired of being afraid. The weeks that followed were bad. They were very bad. Zoran had found a new hobby, and that hobby was making Pete Sullivan's life miserable. Every day brought a new humiliation. Every shift brought new fear. The Varkas seemed to enjoy it, like a cat play with a mouse before the kill. It started small. Zoran would knock tools out of Pete's hands. He would step on Pete's work when he walked past. He would call him names in front of other aliens, names that made even the other species uncomfortable. Pete took it all without fighting back. What choice did he have? Katie watched it happen and felt the ice in her chest grow colder. She wanted to help, but she didn't know how. She was just one human woman on a station full of species that could crush her with one hand. She had no weapons, no power, no authority. All she had was her anger, and anger wasn't enough. She tried talking to station security. She filed 3 separate reports about Zoran's behavior. Each time, she was told the same thing. There wasn't enough evidence. It was just a misunderstanding. The Varkith were a proud species with different customs. Humans needed to learn to adapt. The security officer who told her this was a Rilken, a tall being with blue skin and 3 eyes. He looked at Katie like she was a child complaining about nothing important. He told her to go back to work and stop causing trouble. Katie went back to work. But she didn't stop being angry. Pete tried to stay positive. He was that kind of person, always looking for the bright side, even when there wasn't one. He told Katie that things would get better. He said that Zoran would get bored eventually and find someone else to bother. He said they just had to wait it out. Katie nodded and pretended to agree. But deep down, she knew better. Bullies like Zoran never got bored. They only got worse. She was right. It happened on a Tuesday. Katie was working in a different section of the cargo bay, too far away to see or hear anything. She didn't know something was wrong until she heard the alarm. Medical emergency, Sector 7. All personnel clear the area. Katie ran. She found Pete in a maintenance corridor, lying on the floor in a pool of his own blood. His face was so swollen that she almost didn't recognize him. His jaw was broken, hanging at a wrong angle. His hands, those clever hands that could fix anything, were crushed and bent. Zoran was already gone. There were no witnesses. The security cameras in that corridor had mysteriously stopped working 10 minutes before the attack. Katie knelt beside her friend and held his hand while they waited for the medical team. Pete couldn't speak. He could barely breathe. His eyes were filled with pain and fear and something else. Shame. He was ashamed that this had happened to him. "It's okay," Katie whispered. "You're going to be okay." But she wasn't sure if that was true. The medical team arrived and took Pete away. Katie followed them to the station's hospital wing and waited outside while the doctors worked. She sat in a hard plastic chair for 6 hours, not moving, not speaking, just staring at the wall. Captain Linda found her there. Linda Hayes was a captain of the Dawn Chaser, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had been flying cargo ships since before first contact, back when humans still thought they were alone in the universe. She sat down next to Katie and didn't say anything for a long time. "He's stable." Linda finally said, "They fixed his jaw. They're working on his hands." "Will he be able to work again?" Katie asked. "Maybe. They don't know yet." Katie closed her eyes. The ice in her chest was so cold now that it burned. "I filed another report," she said. "Security said there's nothing they can do. No witnesses. No evidence." "I know," Linda said. "It's not right." "No, it's not." They sat in silence for a while longer. Around them, the hospital wing hummed with quiet activity. Aliens of different species came and went, deal with their own problems, their own pain. No one paid attention to the 2 human women sitting in the corner. "Let me tell you something," Linda said. "Before the treaty, before humans joined the galactic community, we had to survive first contact. Do you know what that was like?" Katie shook her head. "The first aliens we met were the Torvik. They saw us as prey. They attacked our ships, raided our colonies. They thought we would be easy to conquer. Small, soft, weak." Linda smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "They were wrong." "What happened?" "We fought back. We didn't have better weapons. We didn't have better ships. We just refused to die. We kept fighting until they decided we weren't worth the trouble. That's how humans survive first contact. Not by being stronger. By being too stubborn to give up." Katie looked at her captain. "Why are you telling me this?" Linda stood up and looked down at Katie with those old, tired eyes. "I've seen the way you've been looking at Zoran. I know what you're thinking. I'm not going to tell you to stand down. I'm just going to tell you this. Whatever you decide to do, make sure you can live with it." She walked away, leaving Katie alone with her thoughts. The next day, Katie went to visit Pete. His jaw was wired shut, so he couldn't speak, but he could write. He scratched a message on a piece of paper and handed it to her. "Don't do anything stupid." Katie read the note and put it in her pocket. She looked at her friend's broken face, his bandaged hands, his bruised body. She thought about all the times humans had been told to be quiet, to be patient, to wait for things to get better. "I won't do anything stupid," she said. But she didn't say what she was going to do instead. That night, Katie went to the station's archives. It was a massive database containing information about every species in the galaxy. She found a terminal in a quiet corner and began to search. Varkith physiology, Varkith combat traditions, Varkith weaknesses. She read for hours. She learned that Varkith scales were almost impossible to penetrate with bare hands. She learned that they were incredibly strong, with muscles that could crush stone. She learned that they had been warriors for thousands of years, masters of combat in all its forms. But she also learned other things. She learned that Varkith had weak points behind their knee joints, where the scales didn't cover the soft cartilage. She learned that their throat was vulnerable if you could get past their guard. She learned that their species valued single combat more than anything else, and that there was an ancient tradition called the right of answer that allowed any being to challenge a Varkith to a fight that could not be refused. Katie sat back in her chair and stared at the screen. She had a plan now. It was dangerous. It was probably crazy. It might get her killed. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel helpless anymore. She felt ready. Katie spent 3 days preparing. She didn't tell anyone what she was planning. She didn't ask for help or advice. She just prepared. Every morning, she woke up early and stretched her body until her muscles screamed. Every night, she practiced the movements she had studied in the archives. She watched videos of Varkiv fights, studying how they moved, how they attacked, how they defended. She memorized every weak point, every gap in their armor, every mistake they made when they were too confident. She wasn't strong. She wasn't big. She wasn't covered in scales or armed with claws. But she was smart, and she was determined, and she was very, very angry. On the fourth day, she was ready. The common area of Nexus Prime was the heart of the station. It was a massive open space where beings from dozens of species gathered to eat, drink, talk, and do business. Tables and chairs of different sizes filled the floor, designed for creatures of all shapes. Giant screens on the walls showed news from across the galaxy. The air smelled like 100 different foods from 100 different worlds. Katie walked into the common area just after lunch. The place was crowded. Hundreds of aliens sat at tables or stood in groups, talking and laughing. Near the center of the room, she spotted Zoran. The Varkith was sitting at a large table, surrounded by his followers. There were 5 of them today, all big, all covered in scales, all laughing at some joke their leader had just told. Zoran looked pleased with himself, like he always did. He was the king of this little corner of the galaxy, and he wanted everyone to know it. Katie walked toward him. She moved slowly and calmly, her heart pounding in her chest, but her face showing nothing. She had learned a long time ago how to hide her fear. You had to, growing up the way she did. You had to learn to look brave, even when you were terrified. Zoran spotted her when she was about 20 feet away. His eyes narrowed, and a smile spread across his face. He recognized her. He knew she was friends with the human he had beaten. This was going to be entertaining. "Look," Zoran said loudly, making sure everyone nearby could hear. "The little human female has come to visit. Are you lost, small one? Do you need help finding your way back to your ship?" His followers laughed. A few aliens at nearby tables turned to watch. Katie kept walking until she was standing right in front of Zoran's table. "No," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "I know exactly where I am." Zoran leaned back in his chair, all 4 of his arms crossed over his chest. He was huge, even sitting down. His scales gleamed under the lights of the common area, dark green and thick as armor. His eyes were yellow, with thin black slits for pupils, like a snake. "Then, what do you want?" he asked. "Have you come to beg? To ask me to leave your little friend alone?" He laughed. "It's too late for that. I already broke him. There's nothing left worth playing with." Katie felt the ice in her chest pulse. She wanted to scream at him, to attack him right there, to claw at his face until he stopped laughing. But she didn't. She stayed calm. She stayed focused. She had a plan. "I didn't come to beg," she said. "I came to challenge you." The laughter stopped. Zoran's smile faded, replaced by something that might have been curiosity or confusion. The aliens at nearby tables went quiet, watching to see what would happen next. "Challenge me?" Zoran repeated. "You? A human?" He looked at his followers, then back at Katie. "Challenge me to what? A game? A race? What could you possibly challenge me to that you think you could win?" Katie took a deep breath. This was the moment. There was no going back after this. "I invoke the right of answer," she said. The common area went completely silent. Every alien within earshot turned to stare at the small human woman standing in front of the massive Varkith warrior. Katie heard whispers spreading through the crowd like ripples in water. Zoran's face changed. The amusement was gone, replaced by surprise, and then something else. Interest. Hunger. He leaned forward, his 4 arms uncrossing, his body suddenly alert. "The right of answer," he said slowly, tasting the words. "You know what that is?" "Yes." "You know what it means?" "Yes." "It means we fight. Here. Now. No rules. No mercy. No one can stop it until one of us cannot continue." Zoran stood up, and he was even bigger than Katie remembered. He towered over her, a mountain of scales and muscle. It means I can kill you, little human, and no one will be able to punish me for it. Katie looked up at him without flinching. I know. Then why? Why would you throw your life away for nothing? It's not for nothing, Katie said. It's for my friend. It's for every human you've ever hurt. It's for every being on this station who's too scared to stand up to you. She took a step closer, so close she could smell the strange metallic scent of the scales. And it's because someone needs to teach you that humans are not weak. Zoran stared at her for a long moment. Then he started to laugh. It was a deep, rumbling sound that shook his whole body. He threw his head back and laughed like Katie had just told him the funniest joke in the galaxy. Humans are not weak, he repeated. You have no armor, no clothes, no venom. You are the weakest species I have ever seen. You are soft. You are small. You are nothing. He stepped closer, looming over her like a nightmare made of scales and teeth. But I accept your challenge, little human. I accept your right of answer. He spread all four arms wide, his chest puffed out with pride. Hit me, right here, right now. Hit me with everything you have, and let's see what happens. Katie looked at him. She looked at his scales, thick as armor. She looked at his muscles, hard as stone. She looked at his eyes, full of contempt and cruelty. Then she smiled. Okay, she said. Around them, the crowd began to form a circle. Word was spreading fast. A human had challenged a Varkit to the right of answer. Security officers arrived, but kept their distance. They couldn't interfere. The right was protected under interspecies law. Captain Linda was there, standing at the edge of the crowd. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes never left Katie. Zoran spread his arms wider, offering his chest as a target. He was still laughing, still confident, still certain that this would be the easiest victory of his life. Katie took a deep breath. She thought about Pete lying in the hospital. She thought about Danny back on Earth. She thought about every time humans had been pushed down and told to stay quiet. Then she stopped thinking, and she moved. Katie did not go for his chest. Zoran was expecting her to do exactly what he had told her to do. He was expecting her to punch him right in the center of his body, where his scales were thickest and strongest. He was expecting to feel nothing, to laugh at her broken hand, to show everyone how pathetic humans really were. But Katie had not spent 3 days studying Varkit physiology for nothing. She dropped low and fast, ducking under his outstretched arms before he could react. Her body moved like water, smooth and quick, years of training and instinct coming together in one perfect moment. She spun on her heel and drove her boot into the back of his left knee, right into the soft cartilage where his scales didn't reach. The sound was like a branch snapping. Zoran screamed. It was a sound of pure shock, the cry of someone who has never been hurt before suddenly, discovering what pain feels like. His left leg buckled beneath him, and he stumbled forward, all 8 feet of him suddenly off balance. Katie didn't wait. She couldn't afford to wait. Every second he was still standing was a second he could grab her, crush her, kill her with one swing of his clawed hands. She moved again, faster than anyone expected. The crowd gasped. They had never seen a human move like this. They thought humans were slow, clumsy, weak. They were wrong. Katie drove her elbow into Zoran's throat as he bent forward. She felt the impact travel up her arm, felt the soft tissue compress under her strike. Zoran made a choking sound, his 4 hands reaching for his neck. She had hit the one spot his scales didn't protect, the vulnerable hollow where breath became life. But he wasn't down yet. He was hurt, but he was also angry now, angrier than he had ever been. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to win easily. She was supposed to break against him like waves against rock. Zoran swung at her with 2 of his arms, claws extended, each one sharp enough to cut through metal. If even one hit connected, Katie would be torn apart. She ducked the first swing and jumped back from the second. She was smaller, lighter, faster. She could move in ways he couldn't. But she was also getting tired. Her muscles burned from the effort. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear in her ears. Zarin roared and charged at her, forgetting his injured leg in his rage. He was going to crush her, destroy her, make her pay for every moment of pain she had caused him. The crowd scattered as he lunged forward, 8 feet of fury and scales. Katie waited until the last possible second. Then she moved. She dropped to the ground and rolled between his legs, coming up behind him as he crashed into a table. Wood and metal shattered under his weight. Before he could turn around, Katie was on him again. She jumped onto his back and wrapped her arm around his neck, squeezing with all her strength. Avarkatha's throat was their weakness. Katie had read it in the archives. Their scales protected everything else, but their necks were soft, vulnerable. If you could cut off their air, you could beat them. If you could choke them long enough, you could win. Zarin thrashed wildly, trying to throw her off. His 4 arms reached back, claws scraping against her body, tearing through her clothes and cutting her skin. Pain exploded across her back and shoulders, hot and sharp. Blood ran down her arms. But she didn't let go. She couldn't let go. If she let go, she would die. The crowd watched in stunned silence. No one moved. No one spoke. They were seeing something they had never seen before, something impossible. A human, half the size of a Varkat warrior, was winning. Zarin's movements grew slower. His roars became gasps. His claws scratched at her arms, but there was no strength behind him anymore. His body swayed, and then he fell forward onto his knees. Katie squeezed harder. Her arms screamed in pain. Her vision blurred from exhaustion. She could feel his pulse under her grip. Fast at first, then slower, slower, slower. Zarin collapsed. He hit the floor of the common area like a falling tree, 8 feet of warrior crashing onto the metal deck. The impact shook the ground. Katie fell with him, rolling away and coming up in a crouch, her fists raised, ready for him to get up again. He didn't get up. Zarin lay on the floor, his chest moving slowly, his eyes closed, his body still. He was breathing, but he wasn't conscious. He wasn't fighting. He was beaten. Katie stood over him, her legs shaking, her whole body covered in blood and sweat. She looked down at the creature who had terrorized her friend, who had hurt so many people, who had thought he was untouchable. The crowd was silent. Hundreds of aliens, dozens of species, all of them staring at the small human woman who had just done the impossible. She could see the shock on their faces, the disbelief, the fear. They had thought humans were nothing. They had thought wrong. Katie looked up at the crowd. Her voice came out rough, barely more than a whisper, but in the silence of the common area, everyone heard it. Humans don't have armor, she said. We don't have claws. We don't have scales or venom, or any of the things that make you feel safe. She took a deep breath, feeling the pain in her body, the fire in her lungs. But we survived our world anyway. We survived ice ages and predators and diseases that should have wiped us out. We survive because we never give up. We never stop fighting. We adapt. We endure. We win. She looked down at Zarin one more time. We don't need armor. We never did. The medical team arrived a few minutes later. They loaded Zarin onto a stretcher and carried him away. Katie heard someone say that his knee was destroyed, his throat was damaged, and 2 of his forearms had nerve damage from the fall. He would live, but he would never be the same. Katie sat down on an overturned table and let the medics look at her wounds. The cuts on her back and arms were deep, but not fatal. She would have scars. She didn't care. Captain Linda walked over and stood beside her. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she reached out and put a hand on Katie's shoulder. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen, Linda said, or the stupidest. Katie looked up at her captain and smiled through the pain. Maybe both, she said. Linda nodded. Maybe both. Around them, the common area slowly returned to normal. Aliens went back to their tables, back to their conversations, back to their lives. But they kept looking at Katie. They kept whispering about what they had seen. The human who had beaten Avarkith. The woman who had refused to be afraid. Katie closed her eyes and Let the medics do their work. Her body hurt everywhere. Her arms felt like they were made of lead. Her back was on fire. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something other than anger and fear. She felt proud. The story spread faster than light itself. Within hours, everyone on Nexus Prime knew what had happened. The footage from the common area, captured by dozens of personal devices and security cameras that had mysteriously started working again, was uploaded to the Galactic Network. Within a day, it had been viewed billions of times. A human had beaten a Varkith in single combat. A small woman from Earth had invoked an ancient warrior tradition and won. It seemed impossible. It was impossible. And yet the evidence was right there in crystal clear video for the entire galaxy to see. Katie Morgan became famous overnight. She didn't want to be famous. She had never wanted attention or glory. She had just wanted to help her friend, to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. But the galaxy didn't care what she wanted. The galaxy had seen something that changed everything it thought it knew about humans. The messages started coming almost immediately. Thousands of them, from humans scattered across 100 worlds. They wrote to thank her, to tell her that her fight had given them hope, to say that they had watched the video and cried. Some of them were old soldiers who had fought in the early days after first contact. Some of them were young children who had grown up being told that humans would never be respected. All of them said the same thing. You made us proud. Katie read as many messages as she could. Then she stopped reading and went to visit Pete. He was still in the hospital, but he was sitting up now. His jaw had healed enough of the wires to come out. His hands were bandaged, but the doctor said he would be able to use them again. He might never be quite as good as he was before, but he would be able to work. He would be able to live. When Katie walked into his room, Pete looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. I told you not to do anything stupid, he said. Katie sat down in the chair beside his bed. I didn't. You fought a Varkith warrior in hand-to-hand combat. That wasn't stupid. That was necessary. Pete laughed, then winced because laughing still hurt. I saw the video. Everyone has seen the video. You're famous, Katie. You're the most famous human in the galaxy right now. I don't want to be famous. Too late. Pete reached out and took her hand with his bandaged fingers. Thank you. I know you did it for me. I know you could have died. Thank you. Katie squeezed his hand gently, careful not to hurt him. You would have done the same for me. I'd like to think so, but honestly, I'm not sure I would have been brave enough. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while. Through the window, Katie could see the stars, millions of points of light scattered across the darkness. Somewhere out there was Earth, the small blue world where humans had been born. Somewhere out there was her brother Danny, probably watching the news, probably scared and proud at the same time. What happens now? Pete asked. Katie thought about the question. She had been thinking about it a lot over the past few days. I'm being reassigned. Captain Linda arranged it. They're putting me on a deep space exploration crew. New ship, new mission, far away from here. Is that punishment or protection? A little of both, I think. Some people are happy about what I did. Some people are angry. The Varkith government has filed a formal protest with the Earth Council. They're calling it an unprovoked attack on one of their citizens. Pete's expression darkened. That's ridiculous. He attacked me. He's been attacking humans for years. I know, but under their law, I challenge him. So technically I was the aggressor. The right of answer protects me from criminal charges, but it doesn't protect me from politics. Katie shrugged. It doesn't matter. I'd do it again. I'd do it 100 times. A nurse came in to check on Pete, and Katie stepped out into the hallway. She walked slowly through the hospital wing, past rooms filled with patients from a dozen different species. Some of them recognized her. Some of them stared. Some of them nodded in respect. She made her way to the observation deck, a quiet area with large windows looking out into space. It was late, and the deck was mostly empty. Katie stood at the window and watched the stars. She heard footsteps behind her, but didn't turn around. Morgan, It was a voice she didn't recognize. Deep, rough, speaking in the common trade language of the station. Katie turned and found herself facing a Varkith. Her body tensed immediately, ready to fight, ready to run. But then she looked more closely and saw that this Varkith was different. Older, smaller, wearing simple clothes instead of warrior's armor. "I am Torek," the Varkith said. "Zalrin is my nephew." Katie didn't say anything. She didn't know what to say. Torek moved closer, his yellow eyes fixed on her face. "What you did to him, it was within your rights. The right of answer is sacred. You invoked it properly. You won fairly. I know. Zalrin will never walk without pain again. He will never fight again. His career as a warrior is over." Katie met the old Varkith's gaze without flinching. "He beat my friend so badly that he almost died. He terrorized humans for years. He thought he could do whatever he wanted because no one would stop him." "Yes," Torek said. "He did think that. He was wrong." They stood in silence for a moment. Two beings from different worlds, different species, different histories. "I came to give you something," Torek said. He reached into his clothing and pulled out a small object. It was a stone, dark green and polished smooth, about the size of Katie's palm. Strange symbols were carved into its surface. "What is it?" Katie asked. "It is a mark of respect. In ancient times, when one warrior defeated another in honorable combat, the family that defeated would give this to the victor. It means—" Torek paused, searching for the right words. "It means we acknowledge you. We see your strength. We will remember what you are." Katie took the stone. It was warm in her hand, heavier than it looked. She didn't know what to say. Torek turned to leave, then stopped. "My people have been warriors for 10,000 years. We have conquered worlds. We have crushed civilizations. We thought we knew what strength was." He looked back at Katie. "We were wrong about humans. I think perhaps we have always been wrong." He walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Katie looked down at the stone in her hand. She thought about everything that had happened, everything that would come next. She thought about Pete healing in the hospital. She thought about Danny back on Earth. She thought about Captain Linda and the crew of the Dawn Chaser and all the humans scattered across the galaxy, watching the stars and wondering if they would ever be respected. She closed her fingers around the stone and held it tight. Humanity had been in the galaxy for 40 years. 40 years of being tolerated, dismissed, ignored. 40 years of keeping their heads down and trying not to cause trouble. 40 years of waiting for things to get better. Maybe things were starting to change. Maybe what Katie had done was just the beginning. Maybe other humans would find their courage, their strength. They would stand up and fight for what was right. Or maybe nothing would change at all. Maybe the galaxy would forget about her in a week and go back to treating humans like dirt. Katie didn't know. She couldn't know. The future was dark and uncertain, like the space between the stars. But she knew one thing. She knew it deep in her bones, in the same place where the ice had once burned and the fire had once raged. Humans were not weak. They had never been weak. They had survived everything their own world had thrown at them, and they would survive everything the galaxy threw at them too. They would adapt. They would endure. They would fight. And someday, when the galaxy looked at humanity, they wouldn't see small, soft creatures to be pushed around and forgotten. They would remember what humans really were. Katie turned away from the window and walked toward her future. Behind her, the stars burned bright and cold and eternal. Ahead of her, the galaxy waited. And humanity was just getting started.